command figures, where power becomes legacy.
Hello, we are back here with command figures. Today, we're attempting something, well, pretty ambitious. We're trying to understand the soul of a nation by looking at the two men who essentially built it from the ground up.
It is a massive topic. We are talking about Indonesia, of course, and you really can't talk about modern Indonesia without talking about Sukarno and Suharto.
Right, and the contrast is just, it's what strikes me immediately. Usually you have some kind of continuity between leaders, but these two, it feels like they were different species.
Completely.
You've got Sukarno, the great leader of the revolution, all fire, charisma, huge speeches. And then you get Suharto, the smiling general, who was quiet, enigmatic, and, ruled for 3 decades with a totally different style.
It's the difference between a volcano and a glacier. One is explosive, unpredictable, creates new land in a flash.
Yeah, neither will.
The other is slow, crushing, and reshapes the entire landscape through sheer, persistent weight.
A volcano versus a glacier. I love that. So that's our mission for this deep dive. Trace that timeline chronologically. How do you get from the volcanic eruption to that glacial stability?
And we've got a great stack of sources here. Sukarno's own courtroom defense, deep analyses of his party, and some really fascinating socio-political studies on Suharto's new order.
And that Javanese leadership culture piece?
Oh, that's the key. If you just look at the politics, you miss half the story. You have to understand the cultural software, really, to get how they held on to power.
Okay, so let's wind the clock back. We're not starting in the presidential palace.
Right.
Where does the story actually begin?
We have to go back to 1927. The city is Bandung. Indonesia isn't Indonesia yet, it's the Dutch East Indies. It's a colony.
And a young engineer, Sukarno, founds the PNI, the Indonesian National Party.
And the divide here isn't, let's politely ask for more representation. It was a radical vehicle. The goal was one thing, Merdeka. Independence, full stop.
The Dutch authorities were not fans, I'm guessing?
Not at all. Which leads to this incredible moment in 1930. He's arrested, put on trial in a colonial court. Now, most people would probably plead for leniency.
Right, you apologize, promise to be good.
Sukarno does the exact opposite. He turns the courtroom into a stage. He delivers this legendary defense speech called Indonesia Menggugat.
Indonesia accuses.
Exactly. What a power move. He completely flips the script. He's not the defendant anymore.
The entire colonial system is.
Yes. He argues this isn't about him breaking some law. This is about an inevitable clash between imperialism and the native people. It was this searing indictment of capitalism, of the whole system. He basically tells the judges, history's judging you.
You can feel that heat. There's a quote in the sources about his speeches later on. Everything belonging to the spirit is as though quivering and blazing.
That quivering and blazing energy is what gets them to independence in 1945. He had this idea that revolution was a dynamically dialectical process.
Okay, hold on. Dynamically dialectical process. Unpack that for us. What does that actually mean?
It just means the revolution can never stop. It can't be static. It has to keep moving, evolving, fighting. It's romantic. It's powerful. But, volcanoes are hard to live next to.
Right. So, fast forward to the 1950s. They've won independence. The Dutch are gone. But now you have to actually run the country. And it sounds like it was chaos.
Total chaos. Yeah. They tried a parliamentary democracy, but you had governments falling every few months, rebellions. It was just gridlock.
And a guy who believes in quivering and blazing doesn't have much patience for gridlock.
None. So in 1959, he flips the whole table over. He calls it the year of rediscovery of our revolution. He basically says this liberal democracy thing, it's foreign, it's fake, it's not us.
And this is where guided democracy comes from, which I have to say sounds like a dictatorship with a better PR team.
It definitely concentrated power in his hands. But to understand it, you have to look at the structure. He wasn't ruling alone. He was balancing on top of what historians call the triangular relationship.
Okay, so a triangle. What are the 3 points?
At the top, you have Sukarno himself, the great balancer. Then on the bottom corners, you have 2 forces that absolutely hate each other.
Which are?
The army, which is becoming this huge political force, and the PKI, the Indonesian Communist Party.
The army and the communists. How on earth do you hold those two in the same government?
Well, that was his genius, or maybe his folly. He tried to fuse them together ideologically with this acronym, Nassicum.
It stood for nationalism, agama religion, and communism.
Communism.
Nationalism, religion, and communism. That is like mixing oil, water, and fire.
It is. But Sukarno was a master of rhetoric. He had all these slogans, the 5 magic charms of the revolution. He thought he could just mesmerize everyone with revolutionary spirit and hold it all together.
But you can only juggle knives for so long. The sources say things were getting really tense by the early 60s. The PKI was getting huge, wasn't it?
Massive. The 3rd largest communist party in the world, right after China and the Soviet Union. They were claiming support from something like 30% of enlisted men in the army.
30%? That had to be terrifying for the generals.
It was an existential threat to them.
Yeah.
They saw the PKI as atheists, puppets of Beijing. The rubber band was stretched to its limit. And then in 1965, it snapped.
The 30th of September movement, G30S. This is the moment everything changes.
It's the turning point of the century for Indonesia. On the night of September 30th, 1965, a group of soldiers kidnapped 6 of the top army generals.
And they're taken to a place called Lubang Buaya Crocodile Hole, and they're murdered.
Brutally. Their bodies are thrown down a well. The country goes into shock.
So who is behind it?
That is still debated. But at the time, the narrative was seized almost immediately. The blame was pinned squarely on the PKI. And a major general named Suharto declared they had attempted a coup.
And here comes the Glacier. Sukarno's world is on fire, and Suharto just steps into the void.
And just listen to the difference in language. Sukarno's word was revolution. Suharto establishes something called Kopi Kamemtip.
Okay, another acronym?
Command for the restoration of security and order.
Restoration, order. The exact opposite of blazing spirit.
Exactly. He moves methodically. He crushes the PKI, which leads to this horrific anti-communist purge across the country. And he slowly, piece by piece, just removes Sukarno from the picture.
So the triangle is gone. The communists are destroyed. Sukarno's a figurehead. The only power left standing is the army.
Precisely. And this is the beginning of the new order. From 1966 on, the chaos is over. Suharto's promise is development. But the question is, how do you control a country this vast?
Right, you can't just put a soldier on every street corner. You need a system.
And he built a brilliant, if authoritarian one. The key doctrine is called dual function.
Dual function.
Yes. The military has 2 jobs. One is national defense, sure, but the second is a socio-political role. They're supposed to be stabilizers of society.
That sounds pretty vague, but the numbers in the source material are just, they're mind-blowing.
It's total integration. By 1970, get this, 92% of provincial governors were from the military.
92%. So basically anywhere you lived, your governor was a general.
Almost certainly, yes. And not just governors, mayors, ambassadors, key posts in every ministry. The military became the nervous system of the entire state.
So there's no separation. The army is the state.
It's fused. But Suharto knew a military junta wouldn't look good long term. He needed a political vehicle. He needed to win elections.
But he doesn't create a party. He creates Golkar.
Right. Golongan Karya, or functional groups. It was brilliant branding. Political parties were seen as messy, chaotic. But Golkar wasn't a party. It was a group for everyone. Farmers, workers, civil servants. It was about getting things done.
But it acted like the only party that mattered.
It was a machine. They called it the ABG channels. A for ABRI, the military. B for the bureaucracy. And G for Golkar itself. And they enforced this policy of mono-loyalty.
Which meant
if you were a civil servant, a teacher, a government clerk, you had one loyalty. You voted for Golkar. If you didn't, you weren't just disagreeing, you were being disloyal to the state itself.
Wow. So your job literally depended on voting for the government.
It was a self-perpetuating system. Stability was the goal, and this was the mechanism.
Okay, so we have the military function, Doifengzi, and the political machine, Golkar. But this is where the deep dive got really fascinating for me.
I think I know where you're going.
The culture. Because on paper, he just looks like a standard military ruler. But the sources argue he wasn't just acting like a general, he was acting like a traditional Javanese king.
This is the critical insight. You cannot understand Suharto without the Javanese concept of power.
Unpack that for us, because in the West, power is, a relationship. I vote for you, the law gives you authority, it's abstract.
Right. But in the traditional Javanese worldview, power with a capital P is a concrete substance. It's like an energy, a divine radiance called Wahyu.
Like a light source.
That's a great way to put it. The king has the light. And if you have it, you don't need to shout and wave your arms around like Sukarno. In fact, shouting suggests your power is weak, that you're losing your grip.
Which explains the whole smiling general thing. His calmness was a sign of strength.
Exactly. The powerful man is still. He concentrates power. And this explains how he dealt with Sukarno. The sources use this phrase, mikul dur mendem jero.
To lift high and bury deep. Sounds like a riddle.
It was his entire strategy. He couldn't just throw Sukarno, the father of the nation, in a dungeon. That would disrupt harmony.
So what'd he do?
You lift him high, you treat him with outward respect, call him the proclamator, keep his statues up, but you bury him deep. You strip him of all actual power, put him under house arrest, cut him off from the world.
It's incredibly subtle and ruthless. A golden cage.
It maintains harmony. And in Japanese philosophy, harmony is the ultimate goal. Open conflict is a failure.
And that idea of harmony played into how he ran the government with this concept of musyawarah.
Which means deliberation for consensus. And it sounds so democratic, doesn't it? Everyone talks until we all agree.
Yeah, it sounds great.
But Suharto weaponized it. In his system, consensus just meant agreeing with the leader, the father figure. If you disagreed, you weren't being a loyal opposition. You were disrupting the family. You were being rude.
So dissent becomes disharmony.
Precisely. It delegitimized the very idea of voting. Why would you need to vote? Voting implies conflict. We should all be on one side, the father's side.
That is such a powerful psychological tool. It makes rebellion feel culturally wrong, not just illegal.
And the military absorbed this. The official leadership principles for the armed forces were taken directly from Japanese philosophy. Things like Engarso sung Telodo, setting an example at the front.
So a modern army was operating on the code of ancient kings.
Which gave Suharto a legitimacy that went far beyond just having the most guns. To many, he possessed the wahyu, that divine mandate. As long as he delivered stability and development, he seemed untouchable.
So the new order wasn't just a military dictatorship, it was a cultural project backed by tanks.
That's the perfect way to phrase it.
So we've gone from the volcanic speeches of Sukarno to the silent glacial power of Suharto, from the triangle to the pyramid. What's the big takeaway when you step back?
I think it's that a nation needs different things at different times. Sukarno was the architect of the soul. He created the idea of Indonesia, he gave it pride, but he couldn't build the state. He couldn't make the trains run on time.
And Suharto was the contractor.
Exactly. He built the body, the roads, the economy, the bureaucracy. But he did it by suppressing the democratic soul that Sukarno had ignited. And he used culture as a shield for authoritarianism.
It leaves me with this one big question. We always look at a country's constitution or its laws to understand how it works, but this deep dive suggests that's the wrong place to look.
It really does. It forces you to ask, how much of a nation's political destiny is written in its ancient cultural codes, rather than its modern laws? Suharto didn't rule by the Constitution. He ruled by Japanese philosophy. And maybe, to understand any country, you have to look at the myths before you look at the laws.
That is a thought that is definitely going to stick with me.
From the volcano to the glacier, it's an incredible story.
Thank you for listening. Do not forget to click like and subscribe, and write your opinion in the comments section.